Welcome to our January Urban Food Policy Council meeting. I'm Megan Regan, chair, and here we're gonna just kind of have a soft opening as a community meeting until we reach quorum. Hopefully a few more council members will join. How's everyone doing this evening?
Well,
I'm good.
Doing great.
I turned 50
Excellent.
tomorrow.
You turn 50 tomorrow?
Mhm.
oh,
Fantastic.
that's
Happy birthday.
exciting.
Well,
Thank you.
happy last
Happy
day
birthday.
of 40s. But that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I got my person who turned 50 about a month ago, and it was a fun journey into that. You know, so far the 50s have been good, so I think you'll enjoy it.
Just glad to make it.
It's a big
Half a
step.
century. Yeah.
Especially this mess we living through now. So
Yeah. I was gonna say, and is it actually snowing tomorrow, or is that on Saturday?
I think it's
That's-
Sunday.
Oh, okay.
And by, projections, I've heard anywhere from 5 inches to, I don't know, like 40 feet or something. But it looks like the city's out there batting the hatches down and getting the salt trucks ready. So I think it's Sunday.
Okay. It's coming though. I was gonna say it would have been idyllic to have a white birthday. Like, they say like a white Christmas, but like it's snowing for you to celebrate your 50s.
And or school shut down for weather reasons, not the pandemic, right?
Yeah. Back to the normal.
Oh, yeah. Well, happiest of birthdays and major accomplishment, that many rotations around the sun, many more. So yeah, I think there in terms of kind of hoping for a quorum, if y'all want to introduce yourself now, you can. If not, we'll do our roll call eventually. But there, I think are some of our agenda items that we could start kind of discussing were about the Liberty Street Market, as well as just some kind of future planning. I think that had come more from Mr. Banner as well as Brandon in terms of some kind of future looking data collection or various approaches that Mariah was asking about. And also when we review the minutes, we'll need to talk about last meeting and some changes in council members. So ideally we'll do that more when we have quorum, but if we don't make quorum, I'm still going to open that for community discussion. Anything else anyone wants to share? Thoughts, reflections from last meeting? Again, we can't vote, but we can discuss.
I was interested in learning a little bit more about that choice neighborhood happening over in Cleveland, skimming through some of the website and seeing there's going to be, I really know nothing other than what was spoken here last time and what I saw on that little bit of one-page website. But they said there's going to be some employment opportunities for these communities to be generated. And I would be super interested in learning what that even looks like. I like to pay attention to the language a lot when I read stuff and how things are worded either vaguely or explicitly. And I see a lot of vagueness in that. But again, I don't know a lot about it, so I'm here to learn and listen. But that's kind of where I've been sort of looking at things, thinking about that. Another thing that I thought about as far as the Liberty Street Market was, I know a member, I can't remember her name, but was doing an education component. And I was just wondering what that looked like, what sort of opportunities there were to have some education component to that market, because I know one of the concerns was folks may not buy food, they don't know how to store food, they might not know how to cook food, they don't know. I kind of heard that and read that a little bit in the minutes. So I was sort of like, has that been done? Has it been thought through? Is like, you know what I mean? Since I'm new, I don't know the answer to these questions, but that's sort of the things that been popping around in my head.
No, thank you for sharing that, Jediah. And I would be curious to know if we kind of know some of the City Point folks who are coordinating or planning the choice program. And then just in terms of one of the direct things you said, Jediah, about able to cook food. I know about 5 years back, I did some research in this neighborhood about housing and rental prices based on what you got. Was really, I don't know, maybe naive, but surprised to find that a lot of the apartments didn't come with a range, a cooktop, a refrigerator. And so there, sometimes we think about the time scarcity or the money scarcity. But if you're renting an apartment, you literally don't have a stove or oven provided as part of that rental. That is very different and difficult to cook food with, right? And again, that just surprised me that, because most of us would think, well, lower price will kind of reflect lower amenities or things like that. The prices weren't that much lower than areas like Ardmore, off Renolda, et cetera, compared to other apartments, but the amenities, my goodness, some of them didn't have a range included in the rental apartment. So I think that's a really important issue that you raised too, is that intersection of kind of food system access as well as the features of housing, especially at rentals.
I mean, I know directly. Go ahead, Maura.
No. Sorry. You please go ahead.
I was just going to say that that's a structural issue of not having an actual stove is one problem, right? That one of the things that I encounter about running my garden program at school is the educational component of cooking and storing and canning and all that stuff that goes into fresh organic produce. I've learned that a lot of folks simply don't know what to do with fresh produce. And so, as always, we started having nutrition classes at school, and those have been pretty successful. And then we brought in community members to cook, mostly students at the garden program. Their parents would come in and cook something, culturally relevant. A student from Guatemala, her mom came in and took some of the, some of the mustard greens and made a traditional Guatemalan dish with it, and showed everybody how to make it. So, and that was, enlightening. Folks didn't know, what to do with kale, chard, collards. I mean, collards are just this universal thing. People, you throw them in a pot and cook them, right? People not, but like the more those seems like novelty things, folks don't tend to know what to really do with them. You know what I mean? So.
Well, and that's geographically relevant, right?
But if you ain't got a stove, don't matter if you know or not, right? So, I mean,
yeah.
That's
why.
But
I mean, I was even talking with a family member recently about how, and they're from Italian background, but how growing up you used to walk along the railroad tracks and pick dandelion greens because there was a lot of Italian recipes that would use dandelion greens, right? And so I think here in our geography, we're more accustomed to something like collards, right? But whether it's kale or dandelions, literally things that are just kind of growing and most people want to spray it with pesticides and call it weeds, super nutritional, able to be kind of cooked. But if you haven't experienced it, if you haven't had that exposure in how to prepare it, or what it tastes like, that might be limiting as well, right? It's not just the access to food, but kind of the knowledge on how to prepare it or that time availability. All right, let's see here. All right, looks like we have got quorum. So I think I would like to officially open our meeting at 6:18 p.m. Chair Megan Regan opening our January Urban Food Policy Council. If we could go around and state our name for the record, maybe it's less awkward for me to call on someone and have them state their name. So there, we're just going to go in the order that Zoom puts it for me. Jediah, if you'll go first.
Christopher Jediah Jeffords, council member.
Tambila.
Tambila Christine Covington, council member.
Justin.
Justin Wilson, council member.
And Brandon.
Brandon Williams, council member.
Thank you, Brandon. And there, our city representative.
Mariah Gendy, urban food policy city liaison.
Thank you. And Michael Banner, member of our community.
Yes, Michael Banner.
Thank you, Michael. So they're welcome. We've established quorum. Before we review the minutes and adopt the minutes, I'm going to talk about the unusualness there of our roll call and call to order. In between our last meeting and this meeting, both myself as well as Michael were informed by the city that there are some pretty well-defined term limits in terms of only being able to serve 2 consecutive terms as a council member on an advisory council. And then you need a lapse in serving as a council member before being eligible to be reappointed. And I think my sense of it, I know in the last week or so, I've spent a lot of time with multiple members at our city. I appreciate all of their time, everyone who took my many calls. That I think there was some ambiguity and perhaps just a lack of awareness over the summer when Mr. Banner was invited to reapply for a 3rd term. He, as always, is very committed to our council, reapplied, and I think there was just some information that didn't get passed along in the appropriate time frame. And so after our last meeting, he was made aware, and as chair, I was made aware that he was not eligible to be reappointed for a 3rd term. And that's why I introduced him as a member of our community, and I'm grateful for your time in attending our meeting. But unfortunately and sadly for us, he's had to rotate off the council. Michael or Mariah, any thoughts or comments to that?
Thank you for summing that up, Megan. So I will say that from my end and from Helen, my supervisor's end as well, her and I have had a chance to connect with the mayor's office on this issue, both last week and then early this week. And so what I will say is that I think the issue is still pending. It's unclear. Technically, yes, I think this is Michael's 3rd term, but and Michael, you would maybe understand this better than me, since you're the one that's serving, but I do believe that in your 1st term, it was sort of the inaugural position and not considered or did not serve for a full time limit. And so there may be some more opportunity to have a conversation of whether that counts as really a full term or if you're still eligible to continue to serve. I am not clear on that decision. Last I heard, that was the sort of what was presented to me, is that the mayor's office needed to investigate that further. And so I think until then, they have assured us that you are still welcome to speak at our meetings and that we can continue to consider you as a voting member until that is still clarified. And so I know that wasn't necessarily initially communicated because that's not what myself or Helen initially understood when she had said, well, maybe you have reached your term limit. But I think until the matter is settled, that is, I think, how is best to proceed as well. So I don't see any reason to necessarily make any amendments to the minutes as they are. And yeah, yeah, that's about as much information I think I have at this moment. The mayor's office has indicated to myself and to Helen that they were going to reach out to you, Michael, and to Megan to continue this conversation, because this is really ultimately from it's their purview to make these appointments. And so I can hope to facilitate that conversation. And so, certainly if you're not able to get connected to them again in the coming weeks, or we're approaching our February meeting, I can hope to facilitate making a connection there. But it is not something that is in my hands to necessarily say one way or another.
Great. Well, that's a great update, because I know I've been calling and hoping for return calls from a lot of folks regarding this issue. And then also I had quite kind of diced and chopped up our minutes and concern of there was some thought as to maybe Michael had rotated off in September when the term expired. And so then I was like, I don't know what to do with everything that we voted at last meeting. Do we need to kind of make amendments and things like that to the public record? Because certainly he motioned for items that were voted on and voted as well. So that's really great news. I suppose my read of it is we're in limbo. But to clarify what you said, Mariah, I believe his first term was 2 years, and then second term was 3 years. Is that correct, Michael?
That sounds correct, but I'm not clear on that right now. Exactly. I don't remember reading up twice but twice. I don't remember signing 3 forms, like extending my stay. But I look forward to the conversation. I do, because it was a little more material to it than that as well, with the food works involved as well. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious. So, either way, I'm just I look forward to the conversation. And I appreciate your, staying present and trying to get clarity on all that. I know that's above and beyond the line of duty. So I really do appreciate that. Both of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate everyone at the city's time as well in the last couple of weeks, as we've tried to kind of understand how the sausage is made, and it's not quite clear yet. So that being said, let's go to our most exciting part of the meeting. How about those minutes? Everyone have a chance to read them? Maybe. They were good. They were long. They were detailed. Any thoughts, edits, comments, revisions, enlightenments?
Just the spelling of my name.
Yes, thank you. Let's correct that. Perhaps, let's see, would it be best to chat that to Mariah, and she can make that amendment?
Can you see my name on the Zoom right here, the middle name?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's how you spell it.
So I think there's just the first vowel is an A, not an E.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, nothing.
Any other comments, revisions, or edits to our minutes from last meeting? So as chair, I welcome facilitating this process, but I cannot motion. Would anyone like to motion?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes as they have been presented with the correction of Mr. Jefford's name.
Second.
Thank you, Tambila. Thank you, Justin. We have a motion on the floor with a second.
I don't think I got them to me. Never mind, go ahead.
Did you say you didn't receive them?
Right. The last one I received, it was from June. Well, it said it wasn't from the last meeting.
I am going to forward them to you right now. We can
And that was
table this.
12/14, right? That was submitted via Mariah on 12/14 December, correct?
Correct, Brandon. These were sent out January 11th. I just forwarded them to the Vosotros
Okay, yeah, I didn't. Okay.
email. So we can,
Oh yeah, I got them now.
did you want a few minutes to look at them?
Now I don't want to impede the flow of what's going on. I wouldn't be able to vote on anything unless I read it. So I wouldn't be able to really vote because I hadn't read the minutes from the last meeting.
Would you like us to table the motion for about 20 to 30 minutes so you have an opportunity to review it?
Sure, if that's the majority ruling. If not, I understand.
I think someone can motion to suspend the vote for about 30 minutes.
Well, I'll motion to suspend the vote for 30 minutes.
And I'll second.
Excellent. Thank you, Justin. All right. So we will revisit voting on the minutes about 7 o'clock. Thank you all. And thank you, Brandon, for letting us know that you didn't receive those. I'll also have Mariah kind of make sure she's got the right email address. If not, Mariah, let me know and I'll send you a good email address for Brandon. In terms of old business, I think that we really had a great discussion last meeting about the Liberty Street Market. Some to me, continued interest that I heard from the city in our participation in that market, some great ideas that have some future needs from our committee in terms of Brandon's idea on data collection. Michael talked about some aspects with vendors, as well as some of the questions Mariah had, frequency, timing, all of that. So I'd like to kind of reopen that discussion of the Liberty Street Market with particular kind of nudge towards us thinking about making some commitments as a council, whether that be the things like data collection or a commitment to help staff the market.
Is the city currently staffing it?
Yes. My position is to sort of serve as the market manager. And I believe that was something that was sort of facilitated prior to my time. Tiffany Oliva sort of, I think, had that baton handed to her from this council in terms of taking over that position.
And does that mean that you are the only person staffing it, or is it staffed with other people? Is that a volunteer thing, or is it paid positions that staff it? How's that work?
I believe I'm essentially the main staff person. Again, I have not actually experienced working a market, so it is still to be seen by me if how else it sort of operates. But my understanding is I'm essentially the person on the floor making the market happen from a week-to-week basis. I do know that the facility is actually managed by the Parks and Recreation facility, so it's not necessarily my job to do like the cleanup or those types of aspects, but I essentially come and open the doors and get it going. And so I think, and maybe I invite other members of the council who participated last year to speak to this, but I do believe that Tiffany at least often attempted to try and get members of this council to stay involved. And I think it was sort of not necessarily super consistent. It was just dependent on people's schedules. I think, from meeting to meeting, she would just sort of invite people to come. I do think that Michael probably was one of the people who remained more active with the market because I understand he was also a vendor at that time. But I think moving forward, as I continue to learn the ropes of Liberty Street and my role with this council, I think that I would gain a lot, and I think that the council would also have a more prominent voice in having some oversight in terms of the logistics of the market if we could set up a form of rotation from this council so that we can continue to have input and then it doesn't just become the city's only in terms of decision making. I think I would like to see it remain a partnership with this council to whatever degree that is needed. So
yeah, so I can kind of offer a bit of reflection on some of that. So I was actually, I think, based on how we voted as a council for that 3-month pilot program, the volunteer market manager, just because we needed someone kind of in that slot. But there was also a desire, and for all good reasons, to always have a person from the city staff at the market. And so with the exception of, I think, 2 of them where I was out of state, I would always meet Tiffany about an hour before the start of the market, and we would set up together. Often we would wait for someone, I'm not sure if it was from Parks and Recs or just facilities, to open the gates and let us in. But she and I would set up the tables, set up kind of the physical space, because you know, and with gratitude, when we were looking at applying for the SNAP EBT, ability to accept that, there were some kind of requirements, and I know I met with a consortium of small farmers markets across the state for many months. Someone had to kind of put their social security number out there connected to the SNAP EBT. And in working with the city, again, I was very grateful, offered through kind of back-end administration with the city to do that part of the administrative and finance work. And so again, Tiffany would, as the city representative, the person who was always there from the city, also brought that kind of physical machine and would set that up each market. I don't think there was ever a market where there wasn't someone from the council, though. Michael was there often as a vendor, but again, I know that I was there most markets, and then some other council members were there frequently. I know Brandon was there a number of times, Jacqueline came a few times, Carol, Tambila, etc. So when our pilot was finished, kind of the message we got from the city, and again, I think at least for myself, but many folks on the council took it as a success, was the city said that they wanted to run it as a city market in the same vein that they run the fairgrounds market, right? And so that's kind of where that transition of the city staffing it and taking over kind of leadership and all of the labor involved in it came from. That's kind of my sense of it. Anyone have some other thoughts from it?
I think that was a great explanation. I don't know how my sound is. I think that was a great explanation because I remember y'all was very invested in that process with EBT SNAP, because that was like something that the community had made very glaringly obvious that, you know, it was very important to have that access, even though it didn't get used as much. Then I know you all had, you know, I don't know exactly how you pulled it off, but got the $5 or $10 SNAP bucks, you know, to match with the purchase. So it has been some minimal city buy-in and marketing, and I'm sure those are lessons that you can build on, you know, going to version 3. Then you did get the what was that, community food strategies, the grant through them that helped kind of spearhead this what was it, version 2. I think it's even important to think about, you know, even when Tambila was there, you know, with the urban farm school, I think it's some lessons to be learned there. It wasn't EBT there then, you know what I mean? And the turnout was a little different. So basically, you know, taking all them lessons together and, you know, having someone fresh like Mariah, you know, who's willing to, you know, bring all these parts together and alchemize it. You know, I like what Jedi said about the education component. I'm not sure exactly who he's talking about. I remember Cassie was doing something like that with the health department, with the Healthy Corner Store initiative. And she'll come out and cook food and have tastings all across the city. I think that would be good. I wasn't aware of the people in the apartments close by not having ranges. I didn't even know that. Like that's very significant. You know what I mean? Especially when you're talking about people buying fresh food. So yeah, it's very interesting. I hope we're able to really make a good case, and the city really heeds some of these lessons that we've learned, so we can really put together our best version moving forward, and make this Liberty Street pop.
All right, so I have a couple more questions. Is Liberty, I'm assuming this is a seasonal market? Not
Yes.
year round? Okay.
I believe it runs from April to like end of
How many
September.
people do we need at each? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Oh no, you're okay. I said April to the end of September is
Okay.
I think the dates for the market.
And it's once a week, correct?
Not historically. I would like to, and I think that's a conversation we can have with this council.
Oh, that's right. It was. I remember that from last time. It was.
Yeah.
We were talking about maybe adjusting the schedule.
Mhm.
Is
I think it was
it-
every other week previously.
But that's something we had sort of put a pin in for having a conversation about.
Hmm.
Was discussing that schedule. That's cool.
Mhm.
And so then another question is, how many people are we looking at like wanting or needing in addition to yourself? So assuming that you're sort of the liaison and the connection that would be there each week, Mariah,
Hmm.
are we asking for one person from the council, two people?
I mean, yeah, I think at
Multiple
least
people?
one
I mean,
person.
where do you
I
wanna
would,
go from there?
yeah, I would like to hear maybe council's perspective. I don't think this just comes from me, but I respect that everyone has their own lives on the weekend, so could be a heavy lift for not that large of a group to say 2 people every weekend. And I don't know that that's necessarily. I don't think it's necessary. From what I understand, this market doesn't sound like it's super hectic in terms of a lot of people coming through all at once and needing a lot of that staff support. But I think really in order for the council to continue to have input, it makes sense to me that members at least have the opportunity to come on a relatively scheduled or certain type of frequency so that they can really see how it operates in a more regular time frame, if that makes sense. Because if we continue, especially if we're looking to make amendments or continue to update how we operate, I think it makes sense that this council has a more formal way of observing that, so that way we can, when we do have these meetings and we're discussing Liberty Street business, we have at least one council member with hopefully a relatively recent experience that they can speak to help inform this council. And it goes beyond just my perspective from a city staff person as well. So that's where I am. But I see Brandon has his hand raised. I would love to just continue to have this conversation, hear what folks also feel and how they think would be best to move forward.
Yes, I believe that having 2 council members present during each event is not unreasonable. I think until we make or have some type of need assessment, I think having 2 by default is not an unreasonable request to be on site for a myriad of reasons. But I think that it would be good to have 2 council members on site during each event. So speaking to that, that's my, that's my opinion, obviously. But I think that's not an unreasonable request. I think it's something that I'm willing to participate as far as that rotation is concerned. And since I brought it up, I'm willing to really participate, in most cases, but I do feel as though if we have 2 there during each event, I think that should be the minimum. I mean, one person maybe, but I think due to the sensitivity of this project, I think we should have 2 people on site. because 4 hours are better than 2.
Yeah, and I think I definitely think it's feasible to have at least one council person at minimum at each market. I think it's a great goal and likely achievable to have 2, because often it's been like 4 to 6 p.m. or 3 to 5. For some folks, depending on other commitments like jobs that have rigid schedules, I think having 2 the entire time might not be feasible. What we had as a goal during the pilot was at least one of us there at opening and at least one of us there at closing. And I tended to be the one at opening and Michael tended to be the one at closing, right? And Tiffany was there the entire time, right? But also to Brandon and other folks' interest in data collection, being there is the greatest opportunity to collect data by forming relationships, by observation, but also by direct questions. I mean, I got to know all of the vendors through personal conversation and experience, understanding what their experience of the market was, what their recommendations were, et cetera. So I think that's kind of a win-win. I think
How did that work?
Yeah.
How did that work with you, with yourself, Michael, and Olivia doing those the open, close, and her being in the interim? How was that? How was that experience? Did it work? Did it not work? What is your feedback on those outcomes?
I mean, I felt it worked fairly well. Again, I think for me and my schedule, the after, due to kind of family, like kid care, staying until 5 or 6 was a bit tough. But the beginning was always feasible. So Tiffany and I would meet about 30 to 40 minutes before the market started. We'd open the gates, we'd get the banners up, we would set up tables. And then as vendors arrived, I would offer support to help them get set up as well, right? So even though we didn't officially offer tables, we informally offered some tables, some chairs. I would help vendors carry stuff from their cars and get set up, hang their banners. And so I think, having that operational support felt pretty high touch for our vendors, right? It offered a sense of connection and camaraderie, that it wasn't just, hey, you're all kind of on your own, but we're here to kind of offer some support. And then I think there at closing, sometimes it would start to get dark, right? There was some kind of physical aspects of closing the gates and locking them and all of that. And I think often it's better to have 2, not just one person there locking it up, especially depending on kind of those months where it started to get darker earlier. How would you, Michael? I mean, you were there a lot as well, especially in the end. What was your sense?
I think we handled it well. I think it was pretty easy. Of course, I'll say that. It was normal. It was nothing outside the norm. I was just grabbing some food and coming up there, really to support the Liberty Street Market more than anything. I could have sold it at home or through the neighborhood, but I wanted to make sure I had a presence. And I think like you and Tiffany's lift, showing up early, opening the gates, setting up the machines, setting whatever order need to be in place. I think, if it was easy for you last year, I think it's going to be even easier this year coming up. So I'm looking to, as everyone was talking, even when you mentioned the dandelions on the side of the road, that are now getting sprayed with pesticides, and just the whole lack of access for land and water in general. I think this year, this version right here, pardon me if I'm certain, but I feel like we should definitely make some kind of ask of the city, as a council. Like, we've been hanging around, the city, they pay attention to the food council when they want to, that's cool and everything. But I think we should really make them pay attention. I think we got some great talent on our food council. starting all the way at the top with you, Megan. So I think it'll be really good to, get some type of support with the water access to make the food, make this farmers market mean something, because people are, like I said, it's easy, but it's really mediocre. You know what I'm saying? We could be doing a lot better if we had a real intentional buy-in from the city. And if we're not able to get that support at this point with, the coffers filled with ARPA funding, we got a new resiliency officer who's ready to, start a new trend, not just continue what was already going on, but actually uplift the cultures of this farmers market. I think that's something that I'd be willing to, of course I'd be willing to show up at a farmers market twice a month, but I'm willing to pitch in towards, making it easier for urban farmers to actually be industrious, So that's kind of how I wanted to add on.
Thank you, Michael. And I think Justin's had his hand up, so I want to kind of turn the floor over to him. But I think kind of circling back to some of Brandon's thoughts last meeting, we need to know what some of those kind of last mile challenges are for local farmers who weren't at the market, right? Because I think the more vendors we have, the more stability in what's always available and or when it's available, that customers will come to rely or, just be able to predict that more as well.
All right. So for those of you who have done this, in the past and been a part of the volunteering and been there, do you think that having a rotating schedule is more efficient, or is it smarter to have it be a thing where it's sort of a sign up? You create a Google sheet and you have everybody that's on the council put down the days that they're able and willing to come, and then we can all look at it at the same time and see what days are covered, what days are not covered, and know when there's an empty spot, and maybe you can figure it out, and we can have that conversation as a group and say, hey, there's nobody coming on this day. Who's available? Who's not? Why not? And then second question, and then I'll let you guys answer, is does this market lend itself to sort of, I don't know, maybe kill two birds with one stone, using Jediah's thoughts on, having educational piece and can also sort of solve some of your problems as well, Michael, and being like set up cooking classes at the market and use the products that people are bringing there to sell, teach them how to cook them while they're there, bring more people in. You have a bigger crowd. The bigger the crowd, the easier it is to get your message out, and use the market itself as the tool instead of trying to solve the problem with 7 of us sitting here on a screen.
I like what
go ahead.
I'm just throwing 3 words out here. I really like what you just said. Peace.
Yeah, and Justin, I think that was one of the recommendations Jacqueline had made, was about cooking demonstrations. I know at the fairgrounds a few years back, they tried kind of like there was like a little cooking show that took place, right? But there, I think, whether that's me kind of in the role as chair or, reader of the ordinance, I do want to say it's feasible for us to provide support and some staffing. In terms of our duties as defined by city council, it's to make recommendations. And so I would be curious to know if other councils make kind of a regular scheduling commitment. And I hesitate also to kind of, as a council, make a formal commitment rather than perhaps have a subcommittee that tries to offer support, right? Because again, I feel like I don't want to isolate or make some council members who had no idea that part of their role in a once a month council position on Thursday night meetings would also be expected once or twice a month to attend in-person market Friday afternoons, right? I don't know what other folks' job commitments, personal, family, household commitments are and stuff. And so I just want us to be really respectful and cautious, that individually that might not be possible for every single person.
And I think that's a really fair and wise perspective to look at it. Our jobs here are not necessarily as a group of volunteers, but as a group of advisors. And while we may all be here because we want to be volunteers, it's not necessarily the job of this meeting. And maybe from that perspective, the advice should perhaps be more of create a volunteer opportunity that a larger group of people are able to participate in.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that I think that is all just great information and thoughts. So thank you for everyone for sharing. To Megan's point, I think a subcommittee does sound like the right avenue to maybe try and organize a little more formally how members of this council specifically would like to attend the markets as well. And I think it's a great idea to maybe try and use the market to some extent as an opportunity to make educational connections with food as well, whether it's a cooking demonstration. My one thought of hesitancy, and maybe this is something that people individually can think on and we can revisit in our next month's council meeting, is with COVID, I wonder if there are any kind of limitations or restrictions in terms of preparing food in an open space like that. And I say that as, again, personally, I've also been a vendor with farmers markets all throughout COVID, particularly with the Cobblestone Farmers Market. I know they've made a lot of changes for the way they have operated. And I know that they used to do more food, like cooking demonstrations and whatnot at the market. And that's something that I've seen not as much in the last year or two. And so I don't know if that's just them being cautious or if that there's actually like a liability issue there. And so that's, I think, a piece that we should maybe individually look into and revisit in our next meeting if folks are open to that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there we had some pretty good COVID protocols at the market. Certainly, when we did our pilot program of the market, this was summer of 2020. And so it was masks required and we provided masks. We did have some vendors who prepared food at the market. And because it's an open air space, and vendors as well as customers wore masks. I know, for example, Jimmy would, there were times when he prepared kettle corn. I think he might have done apple cider at some point, right? So there, I would be curious from the city. I think, I'm not sure if it was Michael or someone that asked in the chat, what are the protocols at fairgrounds? Are there kind of standard market protocols from the city, whether that's staffing, which I think he asked about, or specifically here related to COVID, because again, this is a city facility. My understanding after our pilot program from Tiffany was that the pilot went well and the city saw it as a viable market and the city was going to operate it as a city market under that same kind of approach that the city operates fairgrounds. There's a market manager, there's operational staff, there's support in terms of facilities and things like that. So to me, we would follow city protocol.
Yeah. I think to Michael's question, the fairgrounds farmers market, at least in terms of their day-to-day operations, has a market manager and it's just one individual. He doesn't have a whole staff that works with him and he's responsible for actually cleaning up the facility and stuff at the end as well. It's an individual named Willie. He's a tried and true character to that market. He's been with them for years and people have a lot of love for Willie. But I do think there may be other people who work in terms of the operationalizing the market, but from behind the scenes, I'm not exactly sure what department the Fairgrounds Farmers Market sits in. I feel like it might be community development, but that is something that I've actually thought about trying to work on individually to see what kind of resources they have, because it seems like there's already a group of people at the city who run a farmers market. So trying to connect to talk about ways that we could connect on resources. This is not something I've been able to do as of yet, though. So perhaps, again, we could put a pin on that, and I could have the opportunity to revisit and give an update in our next meeting for next month. And in terms of creating a subcommittee, I don't know, Megan or folks from this council, you'd let me know, but is that something we need to vote on to create a formal subcommittee? And if so, and I'm seeing in the comments and from people's just discussion here, it does seem like some individuals are ready to make a commitment to do some signups. And so, I mean, I individually am happy to just create like a simple sign up form discussing with the specific dates, so we could go ahead and circulate that. I know still have a few months before April is here, but just to work a little bit ahead of time, so we're not trying to build the house while living in it once it starts. I feel like something tells me when it actually starts going, things may feel busier. So to think on it now when we have some time would be, I think, a good to our advantage.
So yeah, in terms of kind of the Robert's rules and things like that, it would be someone motioning to create a subcommittee. A second, we would take a vote on it. From there, we would explore anyone who may be interested in chairing or co-chairing that committee. Again, we would take a vote on that. And from there, at least in my kind of vision of that subcommittee and or chair of the subcommittee would work directly with you as the city representative who manages the market, in what our role as an advisory council would be. And again, I certainly echo Brandon's sentiment in that we really need that opportunity to be present and active at the market to collect the data on some of those questions that we have in terms of vendors' experience, small scale farmers, production experiences and challenges, as well as how best to position the market for long run sustainability.
Mm-hmm. I do want to just quickly correct myself. Looking into it a little bit just while you were speaking, I think Fairgrounds is its own department, and I think that they manage the market, but probably also work with like the actual like Carolina Classic Fair. So I think they are their own department and deal with the facility as a whole in all events they do, Fairgrounds Farmers Market included. But then again, I was correct in saying that Willie is really the only staff person in person for the events.
Thank you for the clarification. Anyone interested in exploring the idea of a subcommittee?
I think I'm interested, but I'm still trying to keep myself open for the other thing that I mentioned, as far as the support to urban farmers to help them be feasible in that space. If all of that's included in that, I will sign up for that. But I might be, if I had to choose between the two, I might choose for the support aspect of it.
Any other council members interest in kind of chairing or co-chairing a subcommittee? So, just from an efficiency perspective, I wouldn't see us approving a subcommittee and then not having anyone interested in chairing it. That would kind of be a subcommittee that was empty. So
what is the specific focus of the subcommittee? Like what would be the focal point of the subcommittee specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of a field of dreams, right? The person who's interested in it can develop that, right? What I see it as is our council's point person to the city as the city is running the market, right? And so whether we see that as a person who is our council point person to be in regular communication, to get information back and forth between our council and the city regarding the market, leading some of our council's initiatives in terms of data collection, vendor assessment, and or if we take the direction in terms of actually some support staffing for it, that would kind of be developed and designed by the person or persons who lead that subcommittee. And it provides a more focused effort and or direct contact person for the city rather than the general counsel, right? In the same way of the food summit, right, Brandon? I mean, I think you were one of the co-chairs of the food summit, and y'all worked directly with Tiffany to plan that amazing event, or, you know, the Urban Farmers Forum that we had. Again, that was a subcommittee. So in that sense, just kind of the leader from our council.
I wouldn't mind being involved. I would participate in the subcommittee.
Anyone else have any interest in participating in the subcommittee? It would still mean we are all active contributors, right, as the council, but in terms of kind of leadership and setting the direction and connection with the city.
I wouldn't mind participating, but I would not want to lead it having no experience with this market or having done it before.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, that's great. We've got 2 council members who've expressed some interest. Anyone from there have a sense of if we might be ready to make a motion to create a subcommittee for the Liberty Street Market? No, I mean, I don't want to put us kind of in the pressure cooker. So maybe it's something that we've got a great idea out there. We can all think about it, put it on our next month's agenda as kind of new business, as formation of a Liberty Street subcommittee. And from there, we can each bring in kind of our vision of what our council's role might be in that subcommittee, whether that takes more of a staffing lean, whether that takes more of a data collection or operational support, et cetera, et cetera. Does that sound better than kind of pushing it fast?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
For clarification purposes on my end. Now, is this subcommittee, is this just represent, I mean, what is the ratio? How many, do we know yet how many actual council members that need to be involved to legitimize this subcommittee? Or what ratio do we need to have as far as council members to community participants in terms of stakeholders? Because if that's the case, I know some community members, you know, it just depends on how, see, I just need to know the trajectory, because, we can really, it's easy to assemble some people in the community who are active now. They're just in the background, because they trying to see what's what, but it's not really pulling teeth, to get it up and going. It's just, I just want to know, is it solely member led, or is it a cooperative initiative where it's, could be community members and council members that lead this initiative?
Yeah, I think it is necessary to have a minimum of 1 council person on a subcommittee. Ideally 2, but probably not more than 3, just in terms of the total number of council members that we have. And the subcommittee would bring things to the council for voting, right? So if we had half of the council on a subcommittee, it's, I'm not sure that that's quite a subcommittee as compared to a council. I think your idea of bringing in community members is great, right? And I think we need that information. We need that participation and such. So to me, we need a minimum of 1 council member. Ideally, something like 2 or 3 has been typical of a subcommittee, whether that's annual report, food summit, urban farmers forum, et cetera, et cetera. But there 1 would be enough. And I think more than 3 is too many, given our total number of council members.
I do want to jump into the point of community members as well. I do think, it's an excellent idea to include members of the community, particularly if they are interested in participating. As an extension, though, of this council, while community members can be consulted, they technically will not be officially counted as membership to this council. And that's something that I can also verify with the attorney's office to confirm, but
it's subcommittee, so they wouldn't. So what they, so it wouldn't be. It wouldn't. It would. What their participation would be invalid. To this part, are you referring to the subcommittee or just in general?
to the subcommittee. And I mean, in general, because a subcommittee is still a business of this council, although more honed in business, right? That's why we're talking about 1 to 3 members tops, sort of spending their time looking at this specifically to sort of bring back to the rest of the council. But again, not invalid. Like, we are welcome and invited, or are open to inviting community members, particularly those who have an interest, are considered relevant stakeholders, or have some expertise that can enhance what we're working on. But in terms of being actually counted towards the membership of the committee, or if the subcommittee were to take official votes, just like this council, a community member cannot count towards that official legitimate business. But that doesn't mean that their expertise or their interest in participating isn't still open. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying, just don't count. So if we had a subcommittee in the council, it was one council member that one council member would be recognized in terms of contributing to a decision-making outcome.
Or they would be spending their time, I think, working specifically on this issue. And I mean, again, we're speaking on broad terms. So
no, I mean specific. So my thing is, either the community, if you're a community member, your vote, it doesn't count because it's not recognized. But if you are a member of the council, your vote counts. So it's very transparent. I was just trying to understand. That's all. I was just trying to understand. And I'm glad we're having this conversation, because we having a subcommittee. I want to know what the parameters are. I want to know what the protocol is and what the format is, in order to kind
You
of...
can, you can have a voice, not a vote.
Well, and that's interesting.
I mean, just in terms of it being an advisory council, we applied and were approved.
You say what? You say you can have a voice, not a vote.
So you can contribute too, but I think it wouldn't position you as a voting member, right? But there, I guess, Mariah, I'd be curious to know, I think it's the Transportation Advisory Council has a subcommittee. So I would be curious, right? Because to me, thinking about bringing in members of our community to contribute towards a subcommittee or contribute towards an initiative, an area, is different than kind of electing members, right? So I'm just not sure, but I think that there's like a subcommittee on bicycles and greenways or something. That's an actual subcommittee of that advisory council. So maybe that's the model that we asked. How is that structured? Mm-hmm. Previously, when we formed a subcommittee, it's been for specific projects, right? So again, I know Brandon, specifically, you were on the Food Summit subcommittee, right? And I know that we've formed subcommittees on the Urban Farmers Forum, on our annual report, and it just means these are kind of the spearhead council members from our council who are leading that and bring it back to the council for us to vote as a council.
And this is something I will verify with the attorney in terms of your question, Megan and Brandon, about community members' role to participate in the subcommittee.
So my thing is, because this is my thing, what I'm understanding, if nobody on council is interested in doing it except myself, and I was saying the community people, who else is going to be involved? So I'm just saying, if the community, I mean, what else? So what are the other options in terms of getting participation for the subcommittee?
If Brandon, I think, and forgive me if I'm wrong, I think maybe there might be a bit of confusion in what's being asked and what's being understood, and that is that the idea on the subcommittee is that 1 or 2 or even 3 of us get together and come up with ideas that we bring back to the committee to present to the group of us on what we want to do about this idea, and then the whole group votes on it. And the community member idea is that we go to the community members for their potential ideas, but they don't actually vote on it. And if I'm wrong, then forgive me, but I think that may be a slight misunderstanding that's going on here.
Yeah, so what I think is, let's kind of think about the subcommittee, right? And there, I will say quite directly, I'm extremely interested, right? As our chair, I'm not going to also chair a subcommittee, but there I think that subcommittee helps define where our council is going to go in terms of our role with the Liberty Street Market. So again, to me, I am very much interested in more data, more information from producers, from vendors or potential vendors, folks who aren't vending but are producing. I want more information, more data, right? And that doesn't mean statistics as much as just the information, the experience, right? And so I would see the subcommittee as having a very important role in collecting that data and organizing how we might collect it. And then you bring it back to the broader council to present it, right? These are the challenges, or here's the reasons from 6 producers in the neighborhood that don't vend at the market that they offered as to why. How might we best approach making it more accessible for more vendors, things like that, right? I hope that the subcommittee wouldn't just manage a spreadsheet of who's showing up at the market, right? But there's a more kind of active role in that advisory or leadership capacity towards the market and our kind of mission of understanding how urban food policy affects our food systems and well-beings as a community. So I would be very interested in being on the subcommittee, but not chairing it. Yeah, but I would say just in the spirit of time, let's kind of decide that we're going to revisit this as our first item of business in February. And in between, we can all kind of think about or reach out one-on-one or a few on one to kind of go through some questions or thoughts we might have in preparation for February, to think about voting to formally develop a subcommittee.
Michael?
If you're interested in being on the subcommittee, I chair it. Megan.
Excellent. All right. Well, maybe you and I will kind of connect in the month in between. And let's put that as our first agenda item in February to vote on the subcommittee as a council to form that subcommittee. I'm excited to hear, Brandon, that you'd be interested or willing to serve as chair. So let's put that up first on the docket, and then in between, if anyone has thoughts or questions, or we can kind of refine that a bit more, we'll present that next meeting. Does that sound all right to folks? And that would still give us about 2 months ahead of the opening of the market.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just adding on, I would be interested. I finally figured out what word I was looking for. It was sitting right in front of me. But I would be interested in creating a subcommittee for the resiliency of it. I'm sure, of course, Mariah has the resiliency position with the city, but I would like to create some subcommittee around the resiliency of, you can't call it urban farming. We like to call it grassroots agriculture. The reason I'm calling it grassroots is because, in a lot of these cases, the people who aspire to contribute to the urban farming in Winston-Salem don't have the means. They have to just do the best that they can. So I think that would be a worthwhile effort for me to pitch in some data and do some research around to try to energize that aspect of urban farming for Winston. If you want to revisit it next time, or just tease it out there, see if anybody's interested. I know the education will be important, and the water access will be important. Just to try to get more of an impetus out here to push towards these farmers markets.
Yeah, and I agree with you on some of the kind of nuances or kind of not always great fit of the word urban, right? To me as an economist, urban just implies population density, right? So is it more of your term of kind of grassroots? Is it small scale producers, right? I'm not sure what that exact right word is, because again, to me, urban is population density, right? But there, I think some great ideas. I'm excited to kind of move forward and for our council to have an active role in the Liberty Street Market come April, right? So we're going to spring forward. Just in the spirit of time and a couple items of new business. One of the things on the agenda that I put on there is the annual report. Mariah, I'm not sure if you were able to check in the pandemic times, all timelines have been a bit different. But I feel like it was around this time last year that the city asked us to put together our annual report. So I don't know if you have a sense of that or could kind of check into that before we just get the memo of it's time.
Yeah. So I did do some looking into it, and as far as I can tell, it's not like a definite timeline, but I think your internal clock is kind of chiming correctly that this is a conversation I think other committees I think are also considering at this moment. I don't know that it's that city council themselves have a hard date of when they need this report, but it's something that needs to be presented this year. So to, early on to have a fresh outlook and just try to get it into the works so that it's sort of the ball is rolling, I think is a correct concept. But I don't think there's like a true and fast hard date associated with producing this report, but I do think it's a relevant conversation to get going at this moment. But on to that note, I from my perspective, I feel like it really sits in the hands of y'all as the council to produce this report. I mean, given that I'm so new also into my role, I don't know that I specifically at least have the clarity to have a more hands-on role in assisting y'all in terms of actually producing any kind of report in terms of the work you did in last year, since my first meeting with you was just in December. So I don't know if that's something you, Megan, or, returning members tend to take more of a lead on.
No, we do. Yeah, it's not something that the city writes. Again, we tend to form a subcommittee. I think I chaired that subcommittee last time, or at least was one of the couple folks on it. I know that some other council members, I think Tembila as well has been on the annual report subcommittee in the past. We write the content, marketing spruces it up in a pretty brochure, but we usually get kind of a top-down request as to when to do it. So I want to say that we produced our last annual report around the beginning of 21. We started working on it in the end of 2020. I want to say, I think we might have turned it in around February-ish, and then we got on the docket for, I think it's the Finance and Governance Committee. I don't remember exactly what it is. It's got like 3 different words involved where we present it. And so usually the person in your role kind of lets us know, hey, it's about that time. The city is hoping for it. So,
yeah, I mean,
and there, Michael, too, we can explore a resiliency subcommittee as well. We'll put that on the agenda. Those 3 items, which again, I think, again, using that annual report for returning members as an example, it just tends to be easier to have 2 people working on it, and then we bring it to the committee for edits, revisions, inclusions, as opposed to having everyone try to edit a Word document. All right, so I'll say if next in February, we're going to spend a good amount of time on these 2 subcommittees. Probably on March, we'll put as our first item of business the annual report and kind of looking into it. From there, I'll try to pull up when we actually presented it. Again, I want to say we finished it around February, turned it around to marketing, and presented it sometime late spring. Community development housing, maybe it sounds right. And then the last item on our agendas was to just kind of open the floor to Mariah if she had any comments.
Yeah, thank you. So I think in the time since our last meeting, I sort of took it upon myself to go back through and read some of the UDO, which is that sort of document that guides this committee and council with sort of some of the achievable goals that they can be bringing and hoping to serve the city as city representatives, yourselves. And so in that, I wanted to sort of explore some ideas and think through like how this council could be productive and help move forward on some of these issues as they stand right now. And so, in again, sitting about 3 months into my role, a recurring conversation, and I both in this council and in other areas of food work, is the issue of water access, which I know Michael Banner has continued to bring up, which I appreciate his resiliency in having that conversation. And so I wonder to create a more formal structure to have this conversation, because, I've heard the testimonials of Michael, and not just Michael, other members of the community that have this kind of issue. But to go back to something I've heard now Megan and Brandon say a number of times is, what is the specific data around this issue, and how can we use that specific information to move this conversation forward? I think if we want to, as a council, create an impactful difference in terms of policy recommendations, you can say it's the city's responsibility, but I sort of feel two ways on this issue, that, it is the city's responsibility, but you as a citizen sitting on this council are representing the city and advising the city on how to best move forward. And the city needs specific policy and data-driven information to make a change. I don't know that it's going to change just because we as a group say water access is an issue, so give us water access. So I wonder if the question that I can present to this council, and then I'll open it up for people to respond, is, does this council have the ability, the drive, the interest to begin to put together some sort of formal report or proposal that has data-driven information very specific on the issue of water access or urban growers and the challenges they're facing, like these last mile challenges? And when I say data-driven, I'm thoughts that I think would be relevant in considering this kind of question is really how many people are being impacted by this. Is there a map that we could help produce or work with other community members to sort of put together in terms of really showing the city itself, like, where are these disparities and where do they exist? I've heard that there are a number of people that are being impacted by this. I don't have any reason to not believe that, but until I think we have it on paper and you can point and say, this is the number of properties affected, this is the number of growers affected, these are the costs that are associated with it, we really compile that information, I don't know how far we're going to move the needle just by continuing to say it's an issue. So I think my matter of business that I would like to present to this group is opening up a conversation to put together a comprehensive report with some of that data on this topic. And so I will let folks go ahead and respond, turn it over back to the group.
Yo, I think that's great. Like, I'm Tony the Tiger with that one. But yeah, that's to keep it simple. I very much appreciate, your reflected emphasis on that matter, because these are things that we can't get around. And yes, you're right. The responsibility does fall both ways. And I have plenty of energy and the wherewithal to do whatever I need to do to try to get that data and get some more insight on that. So sign me up. Thank you.
So I think where we have been successful as a council, not to browbeat on the name of our council, Urban Food Policy Council, is identifying policies that are inefficient, from a sort of lower benefits than design, higher costs than necessary, right? So kind of when we think about that residential chicken policy, right? We collected data and said, all right, that was kind of brought to us by Mayor Pro Tem and said, I don't know why no one's using this permit. Why am I not hearing that it's beneficial, right? And we did a cost benefit analysis. We collected the data, right? We were basically, that policy at $100 was more expensive than anyone else in the state. Some of them were 0, some of them were 25, and more restrictive, which was costly. You know, only 5 chickens, a coop the size of like a mother-in-law suite, right? But we kind of organize that from a cost benefit data perspective, right? You're never gonna beat the cost of a dozen eggs at a grocery store. And again, we collected that data, we presented it, and the city responded by lowering the cost of the permit from $100 to $25. So I think there, I'm certainly very interested in working on that from that kind of, again, cost benefit efficiency perspective. We need to find where some of those policies are, right? What is a policy? So I know the backflow regulator, I might be butchering the name of that, but like, that's actually a state policy, right? So the city doesn't have jurisdiction to supersede a state policy in terms of, I think the fire hydrants are requiring those backflow regulators, which I think was just an oopsie or oversight misunderstanding among others in the urban agriculture ordinance, right? Not realizing that it was there, and the state supersedes the city, right? But certainly a backflow regulator is what, a few $1,000 at least, is cost prohibitive, right? So to me, kind of what we may do in some of the folks, Michael and anyone else, is let's look and find a policy or two that's related to this, right? And then from there, that's the type of data we present and analyze to say, here's where it's inefficient, here's where it's cost prohibitive, here's where it's limiting access, efficiency, or equity. And from finding those, what feels like small policies, but they're tangible things that we can provide data to the city to evolve their policies, right? Because that's kind of what government does, is they either create, change, or repeal policies. So I think that may be our better approach with the water issue. That's my 27 cents. Yeah.
No, I think that this is hopefully the start of what I would think a productive conversation. It's clear from where I sit that this is an issue that needs to be addressed both in the short term and the long term. I think there's some long-term goals that we can explore as a council as well, of how we can continue to sort of not just address water issues, but in general, prohibitive costs around food access and some bigger projects that I would like to see the city consider and take on. But then there's these short-term goals, which is, while we explore those bigger items, it doesn't change the fact that people do need immediate access. And so with that said, though, I would like to note the time is 7:30, and I'd like to be respectful of people's time. I don't know, Megan, I'll hand it over to you to maybe take that conversation on, but I think that this is something that we should add again to our agenda, maybe for the earlier part in our February meeting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. So maybe Michael, you and I, as kind of you being the one that keeps kind of reminding us of the salience of what's going on with farmers and water access. That you and I can kind of, in between now and February meeting, both look and see if there's some policies or lack thereof that we can bring to our February meeting as potential small areas that we can have some data to present to the city on this area. Any other comments or announcements for the good of our meeting before we close? No, well, I thank everyone for your time, for your commitment to our council, our city and community. And with that, I'll motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Wonderful, y'all. All right, stay safe, stay warm this weekend. I look forward to connecting with some of y'all in between our next meeting. But if not, until then, I'll see y'all in February.
Thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Have a good one.